Hello, everybody. How are you? I am so excited about the lightning talk today, and I'm excited to moderate. My name is Stephanie Gatas, and I have the great honor of being able to moderate today's lightning talk session. I am excited to introduce Graciela Tiscareño Sato. Her talk is going to be about how this Mexican-American aviator learned to belong where others thought she didn't. Let's think about that for a moment. How impactful is that? She is the daughter of Mexican immigrants. Graciela is a highly decorated U.S. Air Force veteran, award-winning author, and bilingual public speaker on women in leadership, personal branding, the art of belonging, and more. Graciela was the first Latina Air Force aviator to earn an Air Medal for meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight. And it was received for combat air operations over Iraq. Oh my gosh, I got chills just saying that. That is amazing. Graciela is now CEO of Gracefully Global Group, an educational publishing company creating groundbreaking literature and online classes to showcase the positive contributions of Latino Americans in the USA to all Americans. Graciela's bilingual Captain Mama, Capitan Mama children's aviation picture book series has won 6 awards and international literary competitions. Graciela is the mother of 3 teens, and when she's not working, you'll find her hubby in the family's permaculture garden, hiking with Yuki, the family's Siberian Husky, or in a kayak somewhere in Northern California. Now I know where to find you, Graciela.
Yes, on the water.
It's an honor to introduce you. Please share your amazing story.
All right, I'm going to go right into it. Okay, I've got 10 minutes and 10 seconds, so here we go. I could have called this the opposite of suffering imposter syndrome. Do you see my screen, by the way?
We do.
Okay, good. So I could have called it that. I am calling it this, as you said. I could have called it the opposite of suffering imposter syndrome because somehow I managed to avoid it. And I'm going to teach you the how because I think it's so important that we have tools for this. And this is all coming from a seminar I created for a client university that I called Don't Be a Chameleon: How to Know Yourself, Understand New Environments, and Authentically Belong Wherever You Wish while remaining you. So I'm going to start with a little video clip because I'm a sci-fi nerd, and it kind of tells a story about belonging. So once upon a time, before the dawn of man, just a tribe doing their thing, hanging out in their own space, associating with like individuals. And in the background, someone else decides to try to belong. Oh, the chaos, the madness. Sometimes I'm sure it feels like that to us when we try to enter new spaces where we feel we belong, but others may not think so. But really, I show you that clip because the need to belong, it is primal, it is tribal, as is the need to recognize the others who are coming in. It just is. And yeah, we've evolved a lot since those days. And so now we have some tools. And I'm going to share right up front my philosophy as a daughter of immigrants. I do not believe in this concept of assimilation that so many like to talk about within immigrant communities. I don't think so. I think that, belonging does not have to mean that you lose your identity, right? And so I think there's a good process that we can learn in how to belong in these new spaces. So, I also reject this whole American melting pot rhetoric that I heard in my immigrant neighborhood, in my childhood. Like, people wanted us to melt into a pot. But, when was the last time you put butter and water and flour in a pot? They're never to be seen again, right? They've completely assimilated. And personally, I have never melted, not for anybody. Instead, I have a different philosophy to share today. I believe in the tossed salad model of American culture, which is everybody adds their unique texture, color, flavor into this beautiful, colorful salad that is our nation, our multicultural nation. So that's a philosophy, and that's where I'm coming from. So, as a global citizen in cross-cultural cross-cultural studies wonk, I've served on 4 continents while I was in the Air Force, and I see belonging distinctly in 2 parts. The first part of how to belong is to know yourself first, to really understand how I think and why I think what I do. It starts with you first. So I encourage everybody to become mindful of our own biases, our own prejudices, our own stereotypes that we just have and why we have them. And to take this conscious time to, when we enter new spaces, to ask who's influencing my mind. And part of those prejudices come from specific reasons. The first one here is the story you've been told from your upbringing. This is a photo of my mom and dad and my siblings, and I was the oldest of the 5 in this Mexican immigrant family, all born here in the US. My parents were Mexico. So you can imagine the very traditional upbringing that I had and the stories that I was told, including stories about other races and other ethnicities, just those stories they tell. And then the current spheres of influence. And you can explore those for yourself by asking, who are my best friends? What do they believe? What do we agree on and what do we disagree on? Really getting an inside look at the stories you've been told. We also hold on to prejudices for fear because something bad happened to me, like I got mugged, and maybe now I'm judging an entire group after one sample and one experience. We also hold on to prejudices because we want to feel safe, security, to feel better about myself. And I encourage you, and I say this tongue in cheek, go look at the LinkedIn, the female lead community sometime for examples of misogynists demonstrating their need to feel safe when they post amazing articles like female fighter pilots in Pakistan. Okay, you'll see some good samples. And another reason we hold on to prejudice is just avoidance. A way to avoid encounters with groups that just make us really uncomfortable that we don't understand. And I'll offer an example. You'll see in a moment when I served in embassy in South America, I felt like I was living in a telenovela, and I really was uncomfortable when the lady of the house rang the dinner bell and her servants came running. I'm like, oh my God, it's a telenovela. So I had a lot of discomfort and ended up avoiding those dinners. Again, my own prejudice at work. The second part, after we know ourselves and where our thinking comes from, that's really helped me to go into these spaces is to really assess and listen and understand the environment I'm going into and start making human connections, like people watching, like really watching the class structures and gestures and mannerisms. And yep, current events, reading up on what's going on in the community, and then intentionally making myself a minority wherever I go. Resisting affinity bias, which is that desire we all have to hang out with like-minded people, everybody from certain groups. I choose to make myself a minority everywhere I go. You'll see that in a moment. So if we had more time and we go into the seminar that I mentioned, I go into exploring the common types of unconscious bias that just exist. And I define them. And there's just 3. And here's a couple more. And in the interest of time, all I want to say about that is I'm recommending Teo Roxon's book called Use Your Difference to Make a Difference. For all of us who are wildly different and we want to do good in the world, we want to serve, this book has been amazing in informing, really understanding my own self. So with those definitions, I want to tell you how I belonged at UC Berkeley when I went there, sight unseen, never seen the campus. I grew up in Colorado when it was only 3% Latinx students. There's our ROTC group right there. Or how did I belong at Air Force flight training, undergraduate navigator training, when we had this kind of ratio, 23 dudes and me? And here's the graduating day picture. And I put this one in because I show this at virtual Veterans Day assemblies. I did 12 of them this week. I asked boys and girls to come up to the camera. And this is a really great explanation of the demo of bias. Girls come up and they immediately, I say, what do you see in this picture? And the girls immediately go, there's only one girl. There's not enough girls. And they see that immediately. The boys come up and they say funny things like, one of them wasn't wearing pants. And I love that so much because that just gave me a good chuckle. But see, boys also say there's only one African-American. Or they say, those are some shiny wings, right? The girls immediately key in on the fact that there's only one woman. That was my graduating class. So the way that I have survived and thrived in these places is just telling myself, I belong, I am needed here, and this is where I'm supposed to be. An affirmation. Same when I went to NATO to work in Vicenza, Italy as the only woman on the battle staff. The American guys wanted me to hang out and have lunch with them. I chose to make myself a minority and be the American officer hanging out with the Italian Air Force to practice my Italian. So I could integrate more into the culture and the environment. Again, I belong, I'm needed here, this is where I'm supposed to be. Then I found myself on duty in Quito, Ecuador, the captain in charge of a group of sergeants from all services doing counter narcotics operations. Some would have been intimidated by this. All these guys were special forces. I belong, I am needed here. This is where I'm supposed to be. I got out, went to Silicon Valley, was hired by a German technology company named Siemens. And I was a global marketing manager, and I started being invited to speak on tech conference panels that look like that. Again, I belong, I'm needed here. This is where I'm supposed to be. And then an Israeli company hired me to do solar electronic tech marketing. And again, same thing, so outnumbered by guys. I belong, I'm needed here. This is where I'm supposed to be. And today as a social entrepreneur, I'm innovating in very white dominated world of educational publishing with bilingual children's books and books for transitioning service members. And you know what? When you're different, you get noticed. We've been honored with 11 literary awards for our 4 titles from 3 distinct communities, very mainstream, and we've shipped our products to 47 to 50 states because we're innovating and we're multicultural. When I do live workshops at schools, like I did in Texas on Friday, inspiring and telling the kids they belong, I say it again, I belong, you belong, I'm needed here, you're needed there, and this is where I'm supposed to be. And same when I'm teaching veterans authentic personal branding workshops, I belong, you belong, you're needed there, and this is where you're supposed to be. And I study outliers like the German fighter pilot who said, doesn't matter if I'm a girl, guys don't have a problem, just got to perform. And then I study outliers, and I'm going to end with this quote from Toni Morrison. She was asked if she's ever going to write more in the mainstream and bring in white characters into her books. And this is what she said.
And saying, you know, is it ever possible that you will enter the mainstream? It's inconceivable that where I already am is the mainstream. Oh, no.
So powerful, so powerful. So yeah, we minority veterans, we're the mainstream. Don't let anybody tell you that we aren't. And in California, where 39.3% of the population is Hispanic, followed Latinas in uniform, you will see who the mainstream is. I belong, I'm needed here. This is where I'm supposed to be. My philosophy since I was 18, I heard Pamela Compost articulate it at an event. So I want to do a shout out to her because she succinctly summarized what I believe. So don't become invisible like that first chameleon I showed you. Instead, be yourself, be authentic, be unusual, be different, and know that you belong. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, I could hear you talk all over again, Graciela. That was amazing. I want to remind everybody that we're going to have a question and answer session at the end of our lightning talk, because I know that we have some questions in place for you, Graciela. I want to thank you for reminding us about those human connections and for us to continue to, observe our surroundings and understand what it means to be who we are and why we are here, and those affirmations and those encouragements. I can't tell you how meaningful it is to have you speak on this and to remind, especially myself as a Latina, that we have purpose and we're here for very important reasons. Otherwise, we wouldn't be communicating here today, right? So exactly. Thank you so much, Graciela. It was an honor, and I can't wait to learn more from you.
I'm going on mute and ready to watch everybody else.
Yes, ma'am. All right, everybody. I'm very excited to introduce you to this next individual, and that's exactly what she is. She's a very unique and special individual. I have the personal honor of knowing her, not just as someone that I work with professionally in our space, but also someone that I can now call a personal friend. So I'm excited to introduce Carrie Jeter. She's going to talk about wars untold and endless stories. So I'm personally excited to learn from her during this session. Carrie Jeter, if you don't know who she is the founder of Freedom Sisters Media. She is a 12-year veteran of the U.S. Army. She won the prestigious title of Miss Veteran America in 2015, which I think is really amazing. She's advocating for her sisters in arms that had fallen on hard times. So after her own journey of self-discovery and embracing her entrepreneurial spirit, Carrie launched Freedom Sisters Media. I'm quite certain a majority of you are very familiar with it, if not all of you. And what they do is they create content, connection, and community for women who defend freedom, simply put, right? Carrie and her team of Right Hers promise to share women-directed stories and embodied experiences in and out of the uniform with our community. I know I've seen that firsthand. Carrie is also the communications director for Never Alone Advocacy, helping survivors obtain the justice they deserve. Carrie, very excited to have you, very excited to hear you share your story and your journey.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super honored to be here. And so just like Garciela, I'm just going to jump right in because this is such a cool experience, having such a short window to share what we want to share. So good afternoon, everyone. It is clearly my honor to be here at the Minority Veterans of America Summit. MVA, as we all know, is a crucial component to unifying all of us together as we fight justice for our collective communities. I'm a veteran, I'm a woman, I'm a writer, a publisher, and a business owner. I'm a mom and a wife to a retired combat veteran. I am also the youngest sister of 3 girls, one of whom is an Air Force military spouse, and the other is happily married to her wife, a former Marine. I am a supporter of social justice and an ally to many. I believe that a more progressive and equitable and compassionate society is possible with the power of, you guessed it, stories. I know that there are many wars untold and endless stories waiting to be shared from the world of military connected women. That is why I founded Freedom Sisters Media. This presentation is based on the women veteran information I have collected over the years, as well as my personal opinions. It is not meant in any way to restrict or dictate your truth. In fact, it is my hope that this just adds to your understanding of who the women are that defend our freedoms, and the many who continue to serve our nation after the uniform. I would also like to note I do talk about a couple of heavy topics, so please listen with care as it might be triggering. My experience in uniform was uniquely mine. I enlisted as a single mom of 3 at 22 years old, and I was still somewhat naive. I was thrown into the world of the Army's premier attack helicopter community, where the macho mindset destroyed so many lives, not just on the battlefield. It was my first exposure to the Army, and it was dominated by sexual advances and the objectification of women. I saw the worst sexual corruption in my life during the 4 years that I served there. I left to become an officer in hopes of changing the optics for myself and for other women. I went to officer candidate school and witnessed firsthand Southern white men discriminate and remove Spanish-speaking soldiers by the dozens, even though many of them were from Puerto Rico. Then, as a young leader, I witnessed the discrepancies of accountability of male versus female leaders. I saw women be reduced in rank for infidelity, while men were promoted to better assignments and find a new work wife. I left the Army 5 years ago as a senior captain, and I was honored to witness the final restriction that was placed on military women lifted in 2013. That was 8 years ago. But we are still fighting injustices against women in the military. And the most recent fight I'm involved in is the failures of leadership of young Corporal Teu. Now, this might be one of those things that's triggering to hear. To date, this is one of the worst cases I have ever seen, and I'm standing on the front lines along with Tay in her fight. Tay was raped by her direct supervising sergeant. She reported it 3 times before it was even investigated. She was bullied, she was reduced in rank for seeking mental health services. She grappled with suicide as the only answer to escape. And in a moment of despair and mental breakdown, she stabbed a door. And as a result, she was thrown into the brig for 328 days under the guise of attempted murder. This led to a bad conduct discharge to a once bright and promising Marine. The severity of injustice and punishment was a triple threat based on her gender, her immigrant status, and her religious beliefs. She's thankfully now safe and working towards a new life. But our fight with the Corps is long from over. In fact, our fight on many fronts is long from over. But the impact we are making for equity is at the forefront of our minds. Freedom Sisters is committed to diversity and inclusion. Women of all backgrounds join the military hoping for a better future for themselves, their families, and our nation. Surprise, spoiler alert, if you think that all veterans look like Captain America, Chris Evans, we all know that is so far from true, but naturally, it's really easy for us to think of a man when we think of a vet, and that's because only 1 in 68 American women are veterans versus 1 in 7 American men are. I'm gonna repeat that. Every one in 68 women you meet here in America have served this country. Statistics show that women veterans are younger and more diverse than our male veterans. The median age for women in 2021 is 49 years old, but 47%, almost half of post 9/11 women are under the age of 35. Women veterans are also more racially and ethnically diverse than men. 35% identify in the BIPOC community. In a recent Wounded Warrior Project survey, more than a quarter of the women identified in multiple race and ethnic categories. Women vets are also more likely to have a college degree than any other group of American adults. Based on this data, it is critical to use our youth, our education, and uniqueness to champion change for other women who can and should serve. We have to ensure that women veterans are represented everywhere male veteran stories are to share the broader view of what a veteran looks like. So many women risk their lives for everyone in this country, and women serve with courage and heroism just like our men. There's a critical need for women and minorities to share stories of who they really are in order to understand those who serve this country proudly. I am a disabled woman veteran and a leader ushering in my sisters into an inclusive community that no matter where she is on her journey, regardless of who she loves, the color of her skin, where she grew up, how long she served, if she saw combat, regardless of her religious belief or her age, she has a place at the table. She has a place in the narrative of women and all veterans who serve. They are all welcome. In spite of the slow progression of the institution, women in the military clearly shows female service members are a force to be reckoned with, and their stories must be told. We support these women to ensure that the America we serve sees the women who have done the valiant work of protecting the freedoms we all love so dear. I am Carrie Jeter, founder of Freedom Sisters Media, and I am ready to share your story with the world. Thank you for being here today and your service to our nation and your position in this fight to help us change the cultural narrative of women who served.
Carrie, wow. Okay, I'm moved. I've had conversations with you, right? So it's no secret that, we share a lot of our own personal battles or exchange of ideas or thoughts, but listening to you speak right now so eloquently about championing change, especially among women veterans and everything that we bring to the table, but also mentioning early on about changing the optics. I think that that was very important to highlight. And thank you for making that known in the very beginning, because perspective has a lot to do with how people view us in this world and our position as women veterans, right? As contributors too, because listening to your story and acknowledging that there was triggering language was very important. So thank you for doing that. But listening to your story and knowing you were forged in fire and you're here on this panel speaking about your experience as an entrepreneur, as a woman leading change, as an entrepreneur with their own publication, encouraging other women to write. I mean, there's nothing I can say enough other than you are phenomenal. And please continue being who you are, and please continue doing what you're doing to change the narrative, because you're doing it in more ways than one.
I won't let you down, I promise. I'm gonna go off camera and off mute and on mute. I'm excited to hear the rest of the stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I am very excited to introduce our next speaker, Willis Gordon. The title of his talk is The Importance of Voting. We all know the importance of voting. He's really going to highlight what that means to us, right? Because everybody has, a very different way of being able to bring us that very important education when it comes to voting. I, for one, would like to be someone that learns more about it, right? Just to put it simply. Willis Gordon is an author, an essayist, an activist, and veteran of the war on terror. Gordon is committed to the improvement of our communities through education, action, and inclusion. So important. He produced and organized the Rock the Block voter registration education concert in 2016, and continues to register voters across Stark County in the greater Ohio area. He has canvassed, advised, or field organized in 4 presidential elections. That is pretty impressive there, Willis, and countless local elections. He is currently the chairman of political education and outreach, communications and community engagement, press and publicity, and Veterans Affairs for the Stark County NAACP. He is the author of 2 short collections, as well as the syndicated column, The Road Forward, featuring in Unlikely Stories and The Devil's Strip. He was also the creator and host of Impolite Conversation, a YouTube discussion show that about finding solutions to our community's problems without getting stuck on our differences. A firm optimist, Gordon believes love is not just tender, but tough. And the only way to arc of history bends towards justice is through the hard work of ordinary people. Willis, you are anything but ordinary. So I am truly excited and honored to introduce you. I mean, I'm honored to introduce everybody, truly, but I mean, do you get any sleep? I just have to ask you before you.
No. None.
Oh, well, thank you for all that you do. We're excited to learn more. So please enlighten us with everything that you have learned.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. One of the things that was so important here, especially with minority veterans, is that I thought it should be important to showcase something that casts a wide net, because I think we need to have a frank and honest discussion about who we are in this country. And I think a lot of the times the through line or the narrative historically has left out the people in this room. Oftentimes African Americans, women, the LGBTQ community. There's been a lot of folks who aren't necessarily in the discussion. And I think that we need to broaden that tent to tell the full American story, because it's about all of us. But I wanted to share something I wrote. We talk a lot in this country about who we are and who we want to be. And we can post online or co-sign our chosen news networks from the comfort of our own homes. But what are we really doing? We've got strong and active mouths, but where are our feet? Do our actions meet our good intentions? Now, we've had a hell of a last few years, but it's also served as a culmination of a season of conflict. For many years, our darker impulses have been creeping back into the mainstream of American culture, to the point where armed white supremacists killing American citizens can just get rolled into a news cycle, where it sparks more debate than change. Now, I'm almost glad that my grandfather, who served in Patton's army during the Second World War, wasn't alive to see these ideals legitimized in this century. The fight of his life being revived for his grandchildren to contend with. I don't want that for us, to have our children and grandchildren grappling with the same struggles that we're contending with right now. All of this should teach us elections have consequences. From your local school board to the presidency, our input, or lack thereof, will reflect in our leadership. And we've faced big turning points like this before. In 1865, we vanquished the Confederacy at Appomattox. There was cause for celebration, but a lack of follow-through led to the nightmare of Reconstruction that lasted decades. In 1945, the Allies crushed the Nazis, only to be met with the dropping of an iron curtain that cast a shadow on the rest of the century. In 1965, after breaking the back of Jim Crow and securing the vote for African Americans, some thought the work was done, only to be confronted with a new Southern strategy. And the birth of the prison industrial complex kept humming with mass incarcerations and heavy-handed sentencing laws. 1865, 1945, 1965. Each of these moments, like today, presents an opportunity. Unlike those times, we can take this one to create a definition of terms. We can not only define who we are, but who we are not and who we will never be. We can prevent ourselves from walking down the same dark roads as our forebears without building up and without ignoring the progress that they made. Now, here's what I really wanted to say is in this moment, it's incredibly important for us to understand that this is a moment in history. A time where we face challenges old and new, simple and complex. We have an opportunity to do what is hard and to fight for what is right and to achieve something great. It's a time for our ambition to match the moment and to reach out and take history by the hand and write a new chapter worthy of the shoulders we stand on. Think about all the people who've inspired you. Think about all the folks who have come before us and all the work that has been done. We are mere links in a chain of progress. We have to be worthy of those who came before in order to create what's going to happen ahead. But the only way we can achieve this is through active participation, not in just elections, but in our communities as well. And cooperation works better than constant conflict and outrage. We have to understand that working together towards a goal that is greater than ourselves is the best possible way to bring us closer together. And this has to be a time where we are brutally honest with each other. Let's stop feeding the data and tech-driven outrage machine and communicate with each other on the level. Things can get complicated and we aren't always going to agree, but I can tell you with confidence that we are built for this. Now is the time for our ambition to meet the moment. If we want to see our communities improve, then we got to put the work in. Too many in recent years have bled and died for our right here at home to vote. But I believe we can do this. As Americans, we accept these challenges because they are hard, because the obstacles seem massive, because the doubters are against us. Think about all the vets in this room, all the people who have defied the odds, who have risen above, and who have heard people say, you can't, which just meant that you were going to do it a little harder anyway. But how do we accomplish this? By taking active control of our democracy. Well, it's easy to be cynical and sit out elections, but surrendering our power doesn't help us. If voting didn't make a difference, then they wouldn't try so hard to make sure you don't vote. Now, I know a lot of people can say, it's not worth it. This country isn't worth it. This is a failed experiment. But humanity's shortcomings are America's as well. Our humanity is inescapable. The idea that America isn't defined by our flaws and limitations, but rather our greatest potential. A country born in blood, madness, and injustice like so many others, but at the center lies something that others don't possess. In that flawed and raucous beginning, in our very fabric is woven a promise. The promise that we would strive every day to create a more perfect union, not a perfect one. Not a country above sin and misjudgment or atrocity, capable of all the things that make us so tragically human, but with an intrinsic obligation to strive to be the best of ourselves. We're struggling today. That doesn't mean we can't pick ourselves up tomorrow. And that's going to take all of us, every one of us, and our diversity is our strength, pulling from different ideas and different cultures and different backgrounds. But no one's coming to save us. There are no political saviors that are going to descend from on high to rescue us from the issues we face. No one's going to fight our battles for us. And we fooled ourselves into thinking that there's some bygone age of American heroes where giants walked the earth and mere mortals wielded the power of the gods. The men and women who fought against the evils of slavery, defeated the Nazis, who fought for the vote, for civil rights, marriage equality. They were all regular, everyday people like you and me. But this is our age of heroes, a time for each one to do their part and to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. Now, I want to share a story before I go. A lot of people have said, you know, over the course of all this time, and Willis, you talk about history so much, and there's been so much time, but we really haven't accomplished much, and there really hasn't been a ton of progress. I want to share this story, and I've shared it before. Now, when I was a little boy, about 5 or 6, my mom and I started this tradition where she would take me to lunch on Martin Luther King Day. And we try and keep this tradition to this day. And every January, we'd go into a restaurant or a diner and take a seat at the counter. And we'd order and eat our lunch. Now, it wasn't until I became a man that the significance of the tradition really dawned on me. I understood as a teenager, but it really dawned on me as a man that the significance when our little began, my mother was taking her child to do something that was totally illegal for her at that age. A simple action that could be met with violence or death where she came from. Here was a woman born into the fire of the Jim Crow 1950s in Harlan County, Kentucky, making the sweeping cadence of history with a simple gesture. Now, we have to be invested in that sort of progress. We have to be invested in those stories and making sure that those stories are told so that people don't believe, oh, this happened 1,000,000 years ago. Who cares? Who cares about the right to vote? Who cares about preserving our democracy? This happened 1,000,000 years ago, and what can we do about it? This is real, recent stuff. Now, our freedoms mean nothing if we don't exercise them. Too many have struggled to get us here, to not move us forward. Now, history is watching. At this critical point, we have to seize control of our own destiny. All we are in the end is stories, legacy. What do we want ours to be? Truth is, it's in our hands. So let's get to work. Thank you.
Woo! Willis, I need to hire you to come speak for me, please. That was very inspiring. And let me tell you, there are many things that I can take away from hearing you speak. That was powerful. And it's powerful because you reminded us here at the tail end of your speaking session to be invested in progress. Those words strike heavily because I think people get very complacent because they think progress has already taken place, and it hasn't. It's taken place maybe in some form or fashion, but the moment we think we've made it or we've accomplished it to a whole, then we lose sight of the greater good, right? And that was something you also mentioned earlier, is working together towards a greater goal. And I think we need to be consistently reminded that we do need to work together towards a greater goal, and that there are strength in numbers, or that wouldn't be a common saying that we hear. You also reminded us that we're built for this, and thank you for that, because people need that encouragement. They need those affirmations. They need those reminders that they are built for this. And unless they get out there and they use their voice, nothing will change. You also said we have to put the work in, right? Nothing's going to happen sitting behind our computer. We do have to be boots on the ground sometimes, and boots on the ground is what's going to lead the charge. But Graciela mentioned earlier that she was thankful that you were giving historical context, and I agreed with her wholeheartedly. So Willis, thank you so much for your very inspirational stories, but also for educating us. I felt like I was learning a lot in listening to you speak. So I truly look forward to learning more from you in the future. And thank you again so much for participating in this lightning talk with Minority Veterans of America.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, we are going to move on. I mean, is everybody like really fired up right now? Because I know I am. And we've gone through 3 speakers so far. And my mind is just turning. There's just so much going on up there right now because I'm just really feeling pumped up right now. So let me, without further ado, really take time to introduce this next individual, Maria Salazar. She is going to talk to us about post-traumatic growth and reconnection through creative arts. So I'm personally excited to learn more about Maria and her journey and what she has to share with us. Maria Salazar is a 9-year veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps, where she served as a logistics specialist. She was born in Peru. Her family relocated to the United States in 1992. Following the heinous acts of 9/11, Salazar enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. She then deployed for 8 months in 2003 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. She holds an Associate's of Paralegal Studies and a BS of Art Therapy from Long Island University. She is the founder and executive director of Claymore Vets, a nonprofit whose C4 mission is to cultivate a creative and connected community of veterans, first responders, and artists to foster social reconnection and growth rooted in clay and visual arts. Maria, I am so excited to listen to you. I'm even more excited to learn more about your NPO, your journey, what brought you here today, and as I'm sure everybody else is. So please, a warm welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, share a little bit of my story. And like you said, I am pumped up. Everybody was amazing with their talks, very inspired. And it actually brings home the point that for me, the core of it all is that veterans at our core, we're creators, you know, we are taught, we are trained to be destructive and, you know, reactive and just like machines of war, right? But they train us to be like that. We're not like that, right? And so that's what the talk is going to be about. I'm just going to share the slides if I can figure this out. 1 second, I think. Maybe I might need Lindsay's help.
Give me 1 second, I got you.
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm so sorry. But yeah, so while she gets that up, we the idea of post-traumatic growth, right? It was a new idea that came up to me when I first initially got back into therapy. It took me, I deployed to Iraq in 2003, and it took me so long to even admit that something was wrong, right? I think the military just keeps us keep your head down. You just gotta keep going, you know, day to day survive. You have to be on autopilot. And it took me like 13 years until I was able to swallow that pride pill and really say, okay, I need help, right? Because I think we operate on, I got it until you don't have it no more. And it was kind of serendipitous how this happened. One of my corporals, he became one of the 22. And it really hit me hard because I had spoken to him the week before, right? And we were joking, and not once did he say like, hey, I'm feeling like this is happening, you know? And it made me want to go back. It made me want to do something more for our veterans because the VA is not, you know, helping us. So a lot of times I feel like we have each other's backs kind of thing. So I went back to school for art therapy because art has always been, you know, the one thing I you know, lean back to. But yes, Lindsay, you can go, you can keep forward. Thank you so much. So this is how Claymore Vets was born. I think there's one thing that a lot of us don't know, and it's a very kind of like the big elephant in the room, is that anyone that serves in the military can develop post-traumatic stress, right? And I don't like using the word disorder because I think we all learn how to cope. So a lot of us don't know this, right? But you don't have to be deployed to a combat zone to develop post-traumatic stress. And a lot of us, the military recruits most of us from minority groups, right? Hispanic kids, Black kids, people that need that financial stability. And a lot of us don't have money to go to college. So we all have a background where we're always surviving, right? We don't have the advantages that other communities have. So we already go into the military with 2 or 3 notches on our belt. And we're always on survival mode. So I think that's one of the things that kind of I noticed that we don't talk about often enough. You can go to the next one. These, so I've noticed that that's the community that I want to reach out to more, just because I feel like even after service, they still fall through the cracks. I was lucky enough that I was able to set up these workshops at my old school in Long Island. My professor was really on board. He was very veteran friendly. And I would bring, these guys were from Samaritan Village. They would bring them out to our university, and we would have workshops. But I noticed, and this was before even Claymore Vets was really a thing. I was just doing this to have a moment of veterans, just creating and stuff like that. But I started noticing that organically, the conversation would develop where they would feel more at ease to talk about, the things that were bothering them and stuff like that. So you can scroll forward. And it started making me back to like my time in the Marine Corps, right? And how we all had like that camaraderie. And it goes back to like, I have your 6, you have my 6, right? It was a hard time realizing when you come back into the civilian world that your friendships and your relationships are not as close knit as it is when you were in the Marine Corps. And so I wanted to recreate that now that I'm out here, now that the uniform is off. How can I, have that same feeling again? You can scroll. So for me, art, like I said, has always been a very, it's an instinct, right? I mean, I was sketching when I was in Iraq. I still had a sketchbook in my backpack, and very seldom times that we had some quiet downtime, I'd be sketching. And I always knew that art for me was the one thing that could calm me down and help me process my thoughts, because like many of us, I'm not good at speaking my feelings or my emotions. And so, but I still needed some release out, right? So artwork has always been that one thing for me to come back to. You could scroll forward. So this is why I initially decided to go back to school for art therapy. You can keep going. But like I said before, it wasn't until I realized that I needed help and reached out and asked for someone. I think that pride pill that all of us, it's very hard for us to accept that we need help, right? And when my corporal became one of the 22, it really, really hit me, because I felt like, am I going to be next, right? If he was, he seemed fine, right? He seemed fine, just like we are. And it really moved me to want to build this community, because I think we already are alone to fight the stigma. And I think together we could shift that paradigm. And creating art is what opens that door for us. You can scroll forward. And so when I was in school, part of my thesis was to do a senior solo exhibit, right? And contingent to this, I was writing my thesis on the therapeutic benefits of working with ceramics and with the veterans community. And it took me about 7 months to complete the entire exhibit. And as I was going through the process of sculpting and building and working with the clay, I started experiencing a self-discovery. And I was able to go back to, traumas that happened to me in my childhood as an immigrant person. I came here when I was 12. I didn't speak English. They threw me into school with a dictionary. So like all these deficits that it already gets taken out as, you navigate through life. You could scroll forward. And I started noticing that it was, it was not easy, but it was giving me a platform to be able to talk about my traumas, right? And anyone who knows me knows that I have the hardest time talking about anything too close or painful. But when I noticed that change in myself and I started bringing other veterans around, and I noticed that there was this organic tribe. Yeah, it was this organic tribe that was forming up. And one of them, he was one of them, and like many of us, do, he was self-medicating, with painkillers and alcohol. And he ended up getting addicted and really fell hard. And he ended up, being homeless in jail. He ended up in one of these Samaritan village homes in New York. And he was one of the veterans that would get bussed out to my studio on Long Island. And when we were working with them, with the wheels, when you work with the wheel, is very, it can be frustrating because you really have to center yourself. You have to not have too much strength, not to be too weak, because then the clay will push you back. But you really have to be in tune to yourself. You got to be able to feel, and he was getting frustrated and he got mad and he walked off, right? But then one of my volunteers went and got him and worked one-on-one with him and brought him back. And, she stayed with him. And then once he finally got it, when it clicked for him, he ended up making 3 sets of bowls, right? And then he painted it, he glazed it and everything, right? And then so the last day when they came to pick up, their finished pieces, I was like, hey, look what you made. Like, this is, you should be proud of this. And he's like, yeah, I am. He's like, I'll be able to watch cartoons with my daughter on Saturday mornings. And then he got all teary-eyed and cried, right? And that, to me, that's when it hit me that this is how we can get our veterans, ourselves, each other, to reconnect. Because when we're in the military, it takes them 13 weeks to train us, right? They sever our emotional cables to make us mission ready, capable, so that when you are, patrolling the sandbox, you're not thinking about your family back home, right? Because you can't afford to feel, right? But then when we come back here to the civilian world, there's no retraining us back how to love our families, how to be comfortable in a family setting. And I think art is that magic door where you can go on a self-exploration, when you go on a self-discovery journey to kind of untangle your own emotions. And then when you make something tangible, when you make something that you can show and take the pressure off of you, but then you could talk about that piece of work, that sculpture, that painting, that art piece, it kind of eases a little bit the tension, and you're able to talk about what inspired you or what pushed you to be there. And across time, I mean, I curate exhibits for veteran artists, and each time that is the one connecting factor in all of us. We can't talk openly, but through art you can tell your stories. And I think once you own your story and you put it out into the world, other people can see themselves in your stories. I think there's one more, but you could scroll forward. Yeah, it's just the logos, but you could take that out. But yeah, so the whole gist of it is that us owning our stories give others permission to own theirs. And art, I think it's the one door that we haven't opened yet, because I think we're a little afraid as a community, because it makes you feel a little vulnerable, but I think there is such a strength in feeling vulnerability, because then other people can connect to you at your source. And so that's what I hope to do, inspire other veterans to talk and share their stories through art. And yep, thank you so much for having me.
Maria. Oh gosh. First of all, I want to say thank you for being so selfless. I could hear the emotion in your voice, and I I could relate to portions of your story and your journey, and I felt connected in a number of ways. But I do want to add, where there's pain, there's beauty. And you have given us a beautiful example of that through your art. I am wowed by what we saw in those photos. Your sketching, to me, is not just sketching. Let's compare our sketches, because if you were to look at my sketches, it just looks like a bunch of scribble. So I'm sure I'm sure it would not be classified as art. In fact, somebody would probably crumple it up and throw it away. So my point is, you are extremely talented, and I hope that that has been shared with you time and time again. Looking at you stand next to your art, knowing that you've turned this into something that allows other people to heal, because everybody's different, right, when it comes to healing, but knowing that they could channel that into something, like you said, tangible, allows them to feel like they're still good at something, right? And they probably discover that there's this hidden talent that they didn't know they possessed. And how important is that? I've been gifted before with gifts from veterans that used art as part of their healing journey. And I can tell you that it is one of the most sentimental things that I hold close to my heart, because I know what it took for them to make something like that. So again, thank you so much for sharing yourself, your story, your emotion. It was raw. And I'm so thankful that you took time to be here and share that with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm so humbled to be in a panel of such inspiring people. And thank you all very much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Well, everyone, you know, these lightning sessions never disappoint. I was truly excited about it being brought back again this year. I think I was excited when it finished last year, knowing they would do it again this year. So that goes to show you how excited I was. But, you know, for Lindsay to bring me back to moderate, truly honored. Let's move on to those question and answers. Question number 1. Is it realistic to view the violence and pushback against inclusion and equity we see these days as the death knell of the conservative movement, socially and politically? Sound off.
I think I can grab that. So I think, yes, it is realistic. The issue is, what do you consider, you know, the death knell, I guess, is death is not always imminent. I don't think it's going to be like in the next 2 years or something. But you have to understand that things ebb and flow over the course of the history of this country. So when you saw in the early part of the 21st century, you saw the first Black president, marriage equality, and the first female presidential party nominee, right at the cusp. I think there was a growing conservative movement who rejected that, and they found effective ways to communicate, to grab some people in the mainstream to come with them. But it reminds me of a book Hunter S. Thompson wrote in 1965 called Hell's Angels. And he was talking about the Hell's Angels. And he was talking about these guys in this motorcycle gang and why they felt like they needed to be menaces to society and why they wanted to lash out. Well, in 1965, the Japanese motorcycles were actually becoming much more prevalent, and they were cheaper and they were easier on gas, and it was just more efficient to do. But these guys drove these old, loud Harleys because they felt they'd been left behind by the women's movement, by the civil rights movement, by economic adjustments, that they just needed to find a way to be loud and aggressive, even though they knew their time in the sun was ending. I think the same thing is true now. There's a lot of stuff happening in Texas, for instance, right now, they're trying to shift the scales. Because if you look at the conservative movement and you look at a real fringe, stuff that used to be fringe anyway, but is now their mainstream, it's dependent upon a waning majority in this country. And more of their people died last year than were born. And so they have to resort to gerrymandering, and sort of keeping dark money in politics and sort of disrupting the discourse in order to hang on to power. And like I was talking about before, stopping people from voting. Do I think they're going to go away completely? No. But do I think that at the end of this decade, they'll be able to win a presidential election or win a national election with the same tactics they're using right now? No, it's just not tenable. They don't have the troops, if you will. So it is a scared and dying movement. But that does not mean that we shouldn't take them seriously, that we don't have to fight against the extremism, that we don't have to continue to make sure that our agendas are cohesive and cooperative with each other, because there is a big tent when it comes to the left and when it comes to minority veterans and this and that. And I think that women, Latino women and Black organizations need to be collaborating. I think Jewish organizations and Black organizations need to be collaborating. Like I said before, collaboration works better than constant conflict. And if we are going to beat this thing, we have to work together. So I think that, yes, it's realistic, but at the same time, I don't think you're going to see it go away completely.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you enough how important it is for us to really come to the realization that collaboration is going to be key, right? So no matter what type of movement surfaces. And being in Texas, yes, I can completely agree with you in that, doesn't mean that they have to win, and not if we put our efforts forward. So thank you so much for contributing. Willis, I truly appreciate that. My next question is to Graciela. How do we help others open up that claim to not see color or differences?
Oh, my favorite question. I was at a bar, and no, I just went through this with, God bless him, an 80-year-old white male veteran from my community on Thursday when we were hanging out in the afternoon after the ceremony. And he kept saying that. And I'm like, I've heard that from way too many people. And I said, what you're saying is that you don't see it because it makes you more comfortable to not see it, right? That's what you're saying. And he's like, no, I just really don't see it. I'm like, how can you not see it? Like, look who's here. There's like 3 Latino veterans sitting with you, right? Like, we all have something in common, but I don't want you to pretend that I'm the same as you, right? Like, I don't want you to pretend, because we're not. I like, see the difference and just embrace it. Like, I embrace your difference. I embrace this. Like, I'm not saying that I don't see it, like, because I do see it. I think it's beautiful. Go back to my salad example, right? It's not all green lettuce. It just isn't, right? So see what's there and embrace it and love it. And I hear that you're thinking that it's, that you think it's a good thing, but then what I feel is that you're whitewashing me, or you want to just equate me with you because it's more comfy, but it's a form of microaggression. Can we just say it? And the same thing happens when, and I'm sure the ladies here who are Latinas, well, you don't look Mexican, right? So that whole thing of like, you don't fit the thing that I think that you are, you don't look that. And so I think that's a good thing that I'm saying that you don't look Mexican. I'm like, what does a Mexican look like? Same question. What does a veteran look like? So I just explain it. I explain that it is okay to see the difference, just like it's okay to see the thing that we have in common, but please see both. That's how I address it.
Thank you so much, Graciela, for answering that question. And I hope that to the person that relayed that question, that her response sufficed. It certainly did for me, but I don't want to speak for anybody else. Okay, so we have another question, and this is for Carrie. How can storytelling be used as a medium for changing the overall narrative of the American veteran? Do you think this is the best vessel for change? And I meant storytelling. I was using my Texas twang and I said storytelling, but you get it.
Yeah, so I think that sharing the stories of who you uniquely are as you served, as you transitioned, really opens up that community in a different way, because everybody's experience is uniquely theirs. And if we're not sharing what our hardships were or what our victories were, what successes we saw or witnessed of other people, then we won't fully ever understand the story. Like the power of the pen, as most of us are very aware of in this circle here, has always been those that have held the power. And I think something that has really shifted through history and time and technology is that storytellers and the power of the pen really do lie at every single level of our country. And it is really important to use that freedom that we have to share those stories, to be able to overturn the narrative, change the narrative, share the narrative. And then even in history, women who flew aircraft in World War II, those were classified documentations until recent history. So I think even pressing in and encouraging those classified mechanisms to release and reclassify some of our own military history to really understand the battles, that how they were really won. And it wasn't just the pilot in the plane was a man, it was everybody collectively working together. I think that is really going to help champion the change for what a veteran looks like, and getting that normal natural tendency off of just men or veterans, but women can stand in that power as well. Minorities can, etc. As we share our stories. And so you have a voice, use it often. There are lots of avenues to do so. For instance, like, and I'll wrap this up with this, when I started the podcast for Freedom Sisters, I couldn't find another one. And now there's like 25, maybe even more at this point, of women who are encouraging other women to come share their stories. And so I encourage you, there's an avenue, reach out to any of those beautiful women who are doing the hard work of getting our stories out there. It's completely within our power to do so now.
And I want to expand on that and say that we need to do this work to collect the stories and put them together. But putting on my little publishing hat, I will say that distribution of story, where it actually goes, is actually super critical. Otherwise, we're just talking amongst ourselves. Right. And that is so important. And that is why I take the tactic that I do with the children's books, is to publish in English and Spanish, because my first language in kindergarten sounds like, just like Maria, like I showed up speaking Spanish. That was my home language. And so when I made the decision to publish my aviation service story in Spanish and English, that just exploded a lot of brains. And I'm going to give you one example of a lady in Iowa who jumped on my Facebook page as soon as we announced that book. And she says, I love that you're writing children's books about your service, but why did you include Spanish? Are you trying to appeal to the illegals? Because see, what I did there is I just blew up her mind. I blew up her stereotype of A, who flies, B, who serves and wears a military uniform, and C, what language we speak, right? And so I do it very overtly to say who is a veteran. And in fact, the session that I just did 12 times, 2 in El Paso last Friday, and then 10 more virtual this week, is I called the talk, Who is a Veteran? And I did my story, but then I included 5 of my women veteran friends and showed their uniform picture and what they look like today. And I made sure I included a Middle Eastern, woman, Ziwa Ahmed, who I went to Berkeley with, who's a 4th grade teacher, and then Amanda Huffman, and then an African-American author friend of mine, Ashley Knight, and then a couple more Latinas. And I just really, in mainstream settings, K through 12 settings, with teachers and kids and parents all watching, I put those pictures out there over and over and over again. So this week, now we have tens of thousands more people that have seen Who is a Veteran. And so we need to make sure that we're always distributing our stories to more mainstream audiences to change those minds.
Thank you so much, Carrie and Graciela, for your feedback on that question. I think it's very important that we continue to emphasize not just the power of the pen, but also the power behind continuing to use your voice, right? So those things are very, very important. I want to pose this next question to Maria. How can folks learn more about Claymore Vets and the work that you're doing, the power of the work that you're doing, Maria?
Thank you. I just wanted to add real quick to Graciela. I totally agree with the audience of who is going to be listening to our stories, right? That's part of the reason why I love curating our exhibits that encompass all veterans of different generations, different backgrounds, different, you know, conflicts, because a lot of times they don't know who to share their stories with. And I think, like you said, opening their paradigms of the people that don't understand this is it's very important. And also because it validates the stories of the artists themselves, you know. And then when one other person witnesses your story, then you feel a pride, you know, like I matter, you know, because you were seeing in me at my core, you know. And it's powerful. It's very powerful. Yes, Stephanie. So we're on all social medias across, you know, Facebook, Instagram. Our website is claymorevets.org. We are mobile. We're mostly based out of New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. But you know, I'm putting my dreamer hat on, and I hope to like travel all the states, having people play with mud and art. So just look out. We'll be out there someday.
Wow. I was going to say, and I'll be the first one in line. So
Yes. Listen, the Pink Berets has been on my radar. So I'm like, I want to go play with them when you guys have the retreats. I'm like,
we would love for you. Yes, let's talk more. I would love for you to do that.
Definitely.
Thank you. Oh, everyone, this has been a very beautiful experience for me personally, but I can assure you from the feedback that we received that everybody felt empowered. People were fired up. So what I want to share with you, right, is a metaphor that was once shared with me, that one day when they look back, they will know that they're standing on the shoulders of giants. And for those who are not familiar with that metaphor, it is using the understanding gained by major thinkers who have gone before in order to make intellectual progress. So I leave you all with that for bringing your journey to us in your sessions, in your speaking, in your stories, in your history. It has all made an impact on each and every one of us. And I also want to remind you to join the Summit Showcase tonight at 7 p.m. Don't miss it. MVA will always bring everything that they've got to their summit. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to our incredible speakers. And thank you to MVA. Appreciate you all.